So I had several responses from people saying they would like to see a little series on this fairy house build. So let's do that. Going to start off with a couple pieces of foam. I have a 2-inch piece here and a 1-inch piece here. You could just stack up a bunch of the 1/2-inch pieces or some 1-inch, whatever. But I want roughly 3 inches high. So I'll glue these two pieces together. Then I'm going to use a circle jig to cut out the round piece for the house. All right, I have my big chunk of foam here. I found the center there, and the circle jig comes with this little piece. It has this nail here that I will press into the foam directly in the middle. And then we come over to the Proxxon. I have the wire set at 5 inches because I want a 5-inch circle. The piece that I press into the foam fits down into the jig here. And then I turn the Proxxon on, and I will slide that little piece into the wire and then rotate the foam, like so. And then I have cut out my 5-inch cylinder. This will become the main piece of the house. A less expensive or simpler option may be just to use some cereal box. Cut out a couple strips of that, roll it up, tack it together with a little bit of hot glue. Now this is a little bit more flimsy, obviously, so I'm going to do 2 layers just to make it a little bit more durable. And on the second layer, I'm going to run hot glue all the way around. And that makes it pretty sturdy. You could even do 1 more layer of that, but this is going to give you a similar structure to the one that I've made out of foam. And, you know, we'll still lay the door and the windows and all of the stones and everything else on this piece just the same. So that's maybe an option for materials you might have laying around already. We are going to make this a stone house. And once again, I am going to use the egg carton cardboard for that. There I have my cardboard ready to go. And then I just take this and I begin tearing it roughly and somewhat organically into stone shapes. You know, I want them to be kind of rounded. I don't want any sharp corners or straight lines. But, you know, just start making a bunch of these of varying sizes. Some bigger ones, some smaller ones. And all right, as you can see, I just started gluing these on. Some of them do have kind of a straighter edge. I like to put those along the bottom or the top. Not that it matters too much. It's okay if these pieces hang over the edges, because I'll go back and cut them flush as I need to. I use hot glue and I just keep laying these on. I find a piece that kind of fits. Maybe you'll need to adjust it a little bit to get to fit in where you want it to. And these gaps in between are fine. In fact, they're desirable. When you get this all painted up, that will just be like the mortar between the stones. They do not need to be all flush up against one another. As I said, in fact, these little gaps are part of the aesthetic appeal of this approach. So I'll finish laying all those stones on and then we'll get this thing painted. I have all the stone pieces attached to the sides there, and I'm just going to now apply the old base coat. That is the black paint and matte Mod Podge mix. The base coat is all dry. Now I'm just going to give everything a coat of the Craftsmart tan. Making sure to get down in all of the cracks and crevices with this. But it does not have to be a super thick coat. You may be able to see the base coat still showing through just a little bit. My next move is I will go through and randomly select stones throughout and paint them either the gray, the golden brown, or a mix of these two. There we have that. Next, I will go over and dry brush everything with the suede. All right, just like that. It already looks a lot like stone, but I'm going to go ahead and go now and hit it with the black wash. And there is the main structure of the house. Stonework all painted up. Let's put a door on this thing. I'm going to use this pill bottle and these 2 pieces of foam here, and as the smallest little bead of hot glue on the bottle here. Tack this part of the frame down, come around on the other side. Just the tiniest little drop of hot glue just to hold it there while I lay down the second piece of foam over the top of that. And then I will just remove it from the bottle. And I have this nice arch-topped piece for the door. Cut the frame off at 2.5 inches. Now I've made my threshold piece about 1.5 inches wide, and this frame is about 2 inches wide, so that when I tack it together, the door frame will be just slightly off plumb. And this just gives it more of a kind of a whimsical design. And I've already made this piece, which will be the door. I'll just tack the frame directly down to it and then cut it out. Here I have all my parts painted. Now I'm just going to assemble them. There's the frame and the threshold. I'll glue that whole thing down to this piece. These will be my cross braces on the door. Cut off the extra from the back. So I've painted this to look like wood already, but I want it to be this yellow, but not completely covered. So again, the point here is that I made it look like wood first, and then I'll paint it the yellow so it will look like painted wood. And I'm really only going to dry brush. And now we just need our doorknob. And for that, I'm going to use one of these little brass cone-shaped beads and one of these straight pins. I'll first give the straight pin just a coat of black. Next, I'll paint it with the Craftsmart Metallic Deep Bronze. Now I'll glue the door onto the piece where I want it. And I am going to press it and sort of bend it down around the curve of the building. And you may notice in doing so that it kind of warps the shape of the door a bit, but I actually like that. It gives it that curve there and adds to, again, the sort of whimsy of the build. And then for the doorknob, I will just glue the cone bead down where I want it, and then just drive the pin through and all the way in. And there is our doorknob on the fairy house, all ready to go. All right, next up, we're going to put some windows on this thing. And this is a very similar project to yesterday's. We're going to have these arch-topped frames. I have 2 of them, and I'll get them both painted. While we're waiting for those window frames to dry, let's make the curtains. I just have an old white t-shirt here that I've cut up, and I am going to just use basically a wash to dye this. I'll just use some purple acrylic paint, and I'll water it down. So I have this now, which is a nice color. All right, my curtain material is all dry now. I want to put a little pattern on this, and I have this just flowering tree stamp and some darker purple stamping ink. And I am just going to go through and stamp these little tree flowers all over this curtain material. And give that ink some time to dry before we move on to the next step. Next, I'll put the ruffles or the pleats in this curtain. I'm going to be using matte Mod Podge. I'll go in and I will just fold over a pleat, and then I will begin brushing on the matte Mod Podge. And you can coat this pretty thoroughly. What I'm going for here ends up being kind of a solid. I'm soaking the fabric pretty well in this Mod Podge. Again, the matte Mod Podge. All right, then I will fold another little pleat over there and Mod Podge that down. That'll be enough folds. Now that that's all dry, glue the window frames directly to our curtain fabric. And then we will cut them out. And we have this. And we will just glue them directly to the piece, again, pressing and sort of bending them around the curve of the building as we do so. All right, and there they are on the side of the building. Now you may notice the seam along the wall isn't the most clean, but that's okay because I'm actually going to flock all around this with the green grass and moss flocking. But that's how I did the windows for the fairy house. Let's build some flower boxes under these windows. All right, I have this piece that I'll use for the bottoms of the boxes. I've traced this curved line around the base of the house so that it'll fit flush against there. Then I have this pen style heat tool that I'll use to just kind of carve that out. So there I have those two pieces, one for under each window. Now I will just build up the boxes around these base pieces. I have all of these pieces here. I'll get them textured and base coated, painted, and assembled. Okay, each of these boxes is a bottom piece. I actually made these filler pieces to go in, and you'll see why later. A front piece, a back piece, and two side pieces. And there, that is all assembled. I'm going to paint this just like I did the door 2 videos ago. And here they are. Let's just get them glued onto the house. And there they are. And then we need to get some plants and flowers in those. And for that, I just use these artificial picks. I get them at Michael's, Joann's, even the Dollar Tree. These are Dollar Tree picks. I got a lot of these on sale after Easter. Look for the sales. I think these were ended up being like $1 a piece. So I'll show you how I use them to populate these planter boxes. I'll start off with one of these picks. You see they're kind of segmented, and I'll just go in and snip one off. So I have this little thing right here. Put a bunch of hot glue on the bottom. Put it where I want it, right into the box. I have these cool things. I can snip them off to the length that I want. Same thing, just a bunch of hot glue on the bottom. Stick it into the planter box. And I like to cram a lot of things into these. I like these little leaves on this one. I'll pluck these off and put some around. Don't be too methodical with this. Just sort of pile them in there and make it really sort of the more messy it is, the better it will look. I'll show you when I'm done with all those. And there you have it. I just cut up all those little bits from those picks and hot glued them into place in the planter boxes. And I think they look fantastic. All right, the next move on this build is to put some flocking on here. I'll put it around the doors and windows and all the way around the base of the build. For that, once again, I'm just using this floral moss from the Dollar Tree. I throw it into this old coffee grinder just to break it up a little bit. And that's the flocking that I will use for the rest of the build. All right, I have that floral moss all ground up, and I'm just going to use some of this Aleene's Tacky Glue. And I like to use this really stiff, very short bristle brush. And I just start brushing the glue on wherever I want flocking to be. As I said, I'm going to go up and around this window on the wall here, down between the window and the door. And then I'll just sprinkle on the flocking. Press it down into the glue and tap off the extra. I'll even take my brush handle here and just kind of knock off places where I see it's just sort of hanging loosely. And we have this effect, and I will do that all the way around the whole house and show you. And there it is, all flocked up. Let's get a base put on this fairy house. I need to make a 7-inch circle, and I'll go back to the Proxxon and the Dungeons by Hand circle jig for that. There we go. Now I'll just base the base. I'll go ahead and just attach this fairy house directly to the base now, and then we'll get it flocked. Okay, the base is all finished. Now you know what time it is.
The what? The mushrooms!
I'm just taking my hot glue gun, and you could use a piece of parchment paper, or if you have one of these nice silicone sheets, take your hot glue gun straight in at a 90-degree angle to the table, very close, and just squeeze out a bead of hot glue. When you get to the end, sort of give it a little wind like this to get rid of that string. You don't want a big string being pulled off of there. And just make a bunch of these little beads like so. Let those all cool. And while they do so, I'm going to take some of these toothpicks, and I'm just going to paint both ends of them with this Craft Smart Vanilla. let those dry as well. And once these hot glue beads have dried, I'm also going to paint all of them with the Craftsmart Vanilla as well. I'm basically base coating them in the white. I'll actually do 2, maybe even 3 coats of this white, just to have a nice thick coat of paint on there. So I'll let them dry. For my mushrooms, I think I'm going to go with this burnt orange color. I'll probably do a couple of coats of this. Now that those are all dry, I'm going to take some of this. It's just the metallic radiant gold. You can, of course, use any colors you want with these, but this is what I'm going with. I have a toothpick here, a little bit of the paint right there. I will just stick the toothpick in the paint and come over to the mushroom caps, and I'm just going to make little dots all over. I just randomly poke little spots with the toothpick all over the place. Lastly, I'm going to finish up with a coat of this gloss Mod Podge. This will make them a little shiny and just seal the paint on there. And it doesn't need much, just a thin coat. All right, now that those are dried, we can just peel them off of the mat here. We have these little mushroom caps like so. And I will take one of those toothpicks that I painted white earlier and just snip off the length that I want. I will take the mushroom cap and just melt the bottom side a little bit with the hot glue gun. Maybe put a little bit of hot glue there. Stick the toothpick in, let it cool. And then I can just press this down into the foam wherever I want to place it. And we have a little mushroom. And I will put those around the base of this and show you what I've done. There are all of the mushrooms in place there on the base. I want to add some shelf fungus to the outside of this build, and I'll show you how I make those. This is very similar to how I made the mushrooms. Again, I'll use the glue gun. You could use a piece of parchment paper or one of these silicone mats. Bring the hot glue gun in straight down to the table, and you're just going to lay an even bead of hot glue. And then I give it this little twirl here and wrap the little string around the tip of the hot glue gun so that it breaks off. This is just like the mushroom caps that I made, except for the shelf fungus, I make them a lot bigger. Make them different sizes. It's nice to have some variety. Just let those cool before you paint them. Again, I am going to just put a couple of coats of the Craftsmart Vanilla. I'm going to probably do 3 coats of this. The hot glue doesn't really want to hold the paint. It's best to put on a bunch of coats. I could also possibly just sand these a little bit or use a spray primer, but whatever. I'm going simple and I'm going cheap here. I start off with a white because whatever colors I lay over the top, I want it to be very bright. Now, you can paint yours whatever color you want. I'm just going to go ahead and paint mine, and we'll come back when I've done that. Just like that. And I have once again finished them off again with the clear coat of the gloss Mod Podge. And now my next move is to take them off of the mat here, and then I will simply cut them in half. And these become little shelf fungus. I'll just glue them directly to the build. Just like that. And then, of course, they look really good if you kind of glue them together in clusters and all around. I'll get the rest of those attached and show you what it looks like. And there they are. Pretty much everything is the same as these mushroom caps. Again, apart from the fact that I've cut them in half and I didn't mount them on little pieces of toothpick. I just glued them right to the wall, but they make great looking little shelf fungus. I made these especially sort of fantastical looking for the fairy house, but in the past, I have painted them with more sort of natural colors. I actually think that this could really use some like climbing vine. Again, I will turn to the Dollar Tree Floral Moss. These come in multiple shades. There's browns and greens. I have this really bright green variety here. And I'm simply going to take this and construct the climbing vines out of these fibers. I'll show you how I do that. Once again, I will turn to the Aleene's Tacky Glue. This is just a high quality PVA. You could just use Elmer's glue. I'm gonna put some glue over here out of the way on my mat. I'm gonna use this style brush here. Take a piece of the floral moss. Just brush the glue directly onto it. It will dry totally clear, so that's not a problem. I have that glued, and I will just tack it down where I want it. Start this one right here, I think, and the glue will keep in place. Just press it to the piece, You can see that this floral moss already has vine-like qualities with these little, like, you know, tendrils that come off of here. Very cool stuff. It looks great. I will continue gluing and pasting these pieces together. I will just connect them like a chain. Where the other one left off, I'll add this piece on and just build this vine up, climbing around in different directions. Sort of just linking it together. And I can even, you know, add some curve to it and glue it in place the way I want it. And you see what I'm doing there. And I'll have it climbing in different directions. You see how I'm just piecing those together like that. I'll add this around and then show you what I've done. And there you have a super simple, super cheap, and highly effective looking climbing vine effect for your fairy house or whatever other build you need to have climbing vines on. All right, now it's time to get a roof on this. I'm going to start off with a piece of heavy cardstock. I will take my compass and then just make a big circle and then just cut your circle out. Next, I'll cut the radius just straight in from one of the sides to the center. And I'm going to take this piece now, and essentially I'm just going to make a cone with it. That will be roughly the size of the roof that I want. So I just overlap these two folds and pull them around, and it makes this cone shape. And I will get it to the pitch that I want. Just hot glue it together. Basically, you won't see any of this, but this will just be the structure that I will lay my shingles onto. And to make the shingles, I'm going to turn once again back to my Proxxon machine. I have these blocks of foam already cut to about the length of the shingle that I want. And I'm going to go through now and just roughly cut the shapes of the shingles that I want. And this is what I've made. So I actually have a whole row of shingles here ready to go. I will then set my Dungeons by Hand fence to the depth that I want. I'll take my block, I'll lay in the wood texture, and then I will slice off a row of shingles so that I have these. But you can see this way I'm able to make a bunch of shingles all at once. Lay in my texture, slice off a row, and I'm a shingle making fool. Okay, I have my pile of shingles. I'm just going to start tearing them off and gluing them on. About a 1/4 inch overhang. And I'll just make a row all the way around. Make sure to start at the bottom edge and work your way up as the shingles are going to overlap one another. Okay, I have the first row. Now I will start the second row, and I'm going to, of course, stagger them so that the shingles fall roughly in the center of the first row. There are all of the shingles attached. I'll base it, and then I'll paint it like wood, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do after that. All right, I have the roof all painted like wood, and I'm going to make this actually colorful. So I'm going to go with shades of purple this time around. I'll dry brush the whole thing in purple. I have that all dry brushed in the purple. And I'm going to go through and randomly select shingles to paint a little darker purple, maybe some lighter, and just give it some variation. So I have this, and I finished it by just dry brushing, only using downstrokes with the Craft Smart Vanilla. Now all that's left to do is to attach this to the house. And here it is, attached securely to the house. I love it. I think it's adorable. I had one final touch I put on, and it was this stovepipe here. I'll show you how I did that. Firstly, I have this disposable smoothie straw, and I'm going to cut it at an angle. So I have a piece that's flat on one end and angled on the other. And then this end is left with an angle, and I will cut off another length straight across the straw this time. So I have these two pieces that were straight at the angle like that. When I turn it 180 degrees and glue it together, I'll have this elbow. I'm just going to fill these with hot glue. I'll just leave it standing on my mat, fill it up with hot glue, and this is going to make it nice and rigid, and let those sit and cool. I'm going to give them just a little bit of a sanding so that they will hold the paint more easily. And then I'm going to glue the two angled cut ends together. This isn't a necessary step. You could, of course, just make a straight stovepipe. Next, I want to make this little cone-shaped chimney cap piece. I'll again use a piece of this heavy cardstock, make a circle with my compass, cut it out, cut to the radius. I'm actually going to remove a lot of this. I have a shape like this, and just form my cone. And once I have the cone shape that I want, I will glue it together. Now I'm going to take the hot glue gun and I'm just going to lay in a row of little beads, and these will be kind of like hot nails or rivets right along the seam where I folded that over. So I have those, but I am going to put a little bit of a base coat on the straw piece. Next, I'll paint both pipe and cap with the Craftsmart Metallic Copper. Now that those are dry, I'm going to use equal parts Craftsmart Apple Tart and Craftsmart Ocean Breeze. And this mix will be used to create our oxidization or our patina. And then about the same amount of water. Just want to water that down a little bit. Mix it all up. Doing an overbrush. I still want the copper to sort of shine through a little bit. You know, let that all dry. Next, I'm going to hit it with a couple of different shades of brown wash. I have the Seraphim Sepia here, and then I'll go back with a little bit of the Agrax Earthshade, but you can use your homemade washes as well. Just gonna kind of muck this up a little bit, making it look like it's been out in the weather, especially around the seams of things. And all that's left to do is just to glue the cap piece onto the stovepipe piece, and there it is. As I said, I just put a little bit of a hole in the roof here. I mounted the pipe into that hole, and then I put a little bit of flocking around just to cover that seam and give it a little bit of character. And that is it. I am calling the fairy house finished, and this will be available on my Etsy shop right now.